Good morning, YouTube viewers and subscribers. So I thought I'd take this time to show you yet another engine. And from the title you can tell what the engine is. This is an OSFS 91 Surpass engine. And I've titled this video The Last Engine because for all intents and purposes it's probably the last engine. It was the last engine I ever purchased. And it will probably be the last engine I ever purchased. So that's why it's titled that. Now this is an engine that I purchased, or at least it came to me probably a week and a half, 2 weeks prior to my hard choices video. And so I really haven't had a lot of motivation to do anything with it, show it, or anything like that. But that particular video, the hard choices video, did stimulate quite a bit of responses from people wanting some of my engines. And many have been dispensed with at this point, I think on the order of maybe 25 to 30 engines. And I know that there was some interest by various people for a four-stroke engine in this size range, but I was hesitant and basically told people I didn't have one available to sell at that time. And I'm going to go into why I don't have that now. But first, let's take a real quick look at the box. You can see here's the box here. It came with a box, and it is the FS91 Surpass. Now, before I open the box and go through the contents and show you how nice this engine is, I want to just kind of digress a bit and explain why I probably won't ever get rid of this engine. Now, it was I started in the hobby in '88, and I think the pictures I'm about to show are probably from 1990, 91-ish. The first picture is this engine was the very first displacement size, the largest engine I'd ever purchased in my hobby career at that time. So it was kind of a landmark for me. I'd been stuck for the last, for the 2 years prior to, 3 years prior to me being in the hobby, prior to getting this engine. It was pretty much the 25 size and 40 size engines. And for the majority of my flying career, I guess you could say, I did stick with 40 size aircraft. But this was the first engine of this displacement that I'd ever had that was that large. And funny as it is, throughout the years of my hobby, I had the 91 Surpass and probably Sato 91, never got into 120s for a long time, and I don't even ever recall in my early years ever even buying a 60 size two-stroke engine. So I was always kind of just a four-stroke person. But anyway, so the first image here is a picture of my Ultrasport, Great Plains Ultrasport 60 engine. As you can see, it has this FS91 Surpass engine in it. And that was just a fantastic airplane, and it's unfortunate that, you know, the hobby has taken the downturn that it has, and they don't offer these kits, because the Ultrasport series of airplanes were extremely easy to fly, very easy to build, featured the Great Plains D-tube wing construction. Everything was just great, and quite honestly, I don't think I put more than 10 flights on that plane just because it was boring. I mean, it was a sport pattern plane, but it was based off a pattern plane type of platform, and it just flew perfectly. I mean, there was really no challenge to it at all. If you could fly a trainer, you could fly an Ultrasport, because they went where you pointed them. They didn't really have the self-correcting behavior of a trainer, but where you pointed it, it went, and it went in a straight line there. So they were very accurate as far as pattern type planes for a sport airplane. Very nice, easy to land. They'd slow up to, you know, full stall on landing, so they were kind of boring. Now, the other image here was the other engine that this particular engine at the time had flown in, and it was an old designed SIG quick build P-51 Mustang. And excuse me, that engine, or that airplane was, and the only thing that was quick about it was the fuselage sides were ABS plastic, so you didn't have to do any shaping. But other than that, the construction methodology of that engine, or that plane, was quite unique, unusual. First time I'd ever had to glue lots of thin balsa sheets together to sheet a foam core wing. It was a challenge, and it might have been a good flying plane. I think I flew that plane 3 or 4 times with a master air screw 13.6 prop, And as the picture shows, it had flaps. I never deployed the flaps. I don't even think I hooked them up, and it's probably a good thing, because after having flown P-51s on real flight and using the flaps and how effective the flaps are, at that stage in my hobby flying, I don't know that I could have handled it, because it would have just never landed. Yeah, I would have never landed the plane at all, except way out in the weeds. But anyway, so that first OSFS 91 Surpass was in 2 airplanes that I flew, and I don't know how long I actually owned that. My memory's going back that far and all that great. But anyway, that was the short history. So in a way, this is kind of coming full circle. This was the last engine I purchased, probably will be the last engine I ever purchase. Therefore, it's a little bit near and dear to my heart. So chances are, if I ever sell it, it will probably be the last engine I ever sell too. So don't get your hopes up I ever have in this one. So let's look inside this box. As you can see, it's this engine, the 91 Surpass, came out in 1988, same year the 70 Surpass came out. So 88 was a very good year for OS production. And this is exactly how it came to me. I can't recall the what the ad said about it as far as runtime on it or anything. I don't know that the person knew, but it came with the standard OS instruction manual at the time. The manual's in pretty good shape, a little weathered, but otherwise in excellent shape. And you always love to see these things too. These are the advertisement sheets that came with OS engines back then, because they were so cool, because they showed all of the engines available on the OS line at that time. And these are actually helpful to help you to identify what engines were put out at that time. So you can see some of them here. You flip it over and there's even more. I mean, here's the 50 FSR, all the FPs, SFs. I mean, these things are just really cool. And then here, you open this up and there's accessories for various engines. Here's an exhaust collector ring for the Sirius FR5 300 radial. Oh, I didn't even realize that. They actually had remote needle valve mounting kits way back then. I didn't know that they were doing remote needles back in those days. I really didn't. And of course you got some exhaust header pipes and stuff. So I mean, this is just, it came with some really cool stuff here, which was kind of one of the reasons I was attracted to this particular engine on eBay. It came with the original decals. What is this little thing here? Warnings, safeties and warnings, your OS warranty, and then of course it came with the template that somebody had actually, cut out. So this engine might have actually been mounted. So that's the contents of this. Let's take a closer look at this engine and the condition of it. Let me zoom in here just a hair more. So as you can see here, the exhaust, it's got a little bit of carbon on there. Smells like it's been run, but that's if it was run, it was run quite a while ago. So as you can see here, get this framed a little bit better. It does have a plug in there. Ugh. Wow. Okay, well, it does have some really good compression. So I mean, if this engine was run, that's strange. A little spring either needs some lubrication or something. That should not just stay closed like that. It should spring back open. So maybe that spring just needs a little bit of lube. Throttle barrel does rotate. It's a little stiff, but not bad. Overall, this engine is in really good shape. In fact, if you look closely at the top of the lugs here, even though they cut that template out, I'm not seeing any evidence there that this has really ever been mounted. It might have just been run in a stand of some sort, but here, something I didn't notice before, there's a little dimple there, like maybe they had this on a mount and they were drilling the mount or something, and they just kissed the mounting lug there, and this front lug looks like it's been wallered just a hair, like maybe it was put onto an engine mount with one screw. I don't know, but otherwise it looks like it's in pretty damn good shape. So what I want to do here, and the extent of what I'm going to do here, is I'm probably just going to remove this portion of the carb. I'm not going to take this off because it's got a gasket there and I don't want to disturb that. I'll loosen those screws so it gives me a little flexibility, and then I'll pull this carb off because I want to pull the rear cover off and the rocker cover here. So let me get some tools to do that. Make sure I get my proper size, proper size bit here for this. I don't want to waller these screws out at all. Okay, so that's, yeah, I think that's a little bit too big for that. You hear that? Listen. That's the sound of a screw that was torqued at the factory. So I'm just loosening that. Now I'm going to just kind of pull these screws out and pull this carb. I loosened that a little bit more than I wanted to, but it doesn't look like I disturbed that gasket, so that's a good thing. So now let's take a listen for these screws. I think my stomach was growling at the same time. Hear that? That's the sound of a fastener being broken loose for the first time since leaving the factory. How do I know that? Years of experience. Okay, wow. Okay, here's something that's interesting. No gasket. First time it's been opened from the factory. See, it's weird because some OS intake manifolds had gaskets and some didn't. Like the smaller engines, the FS20, the 26 Surpass, they didn't have them, and maybe even the 40 FS40 and 40 Surpass may not have. But it's interesting that this didn't even have a rear cover gasket. But I mean, look inside here. You know what I think I see that looks unusual here? A couple of things. It's dry. The bearing looks good, but it almost kind of looks like, and if you notice, we've got a hole drilled in the center of this crank pin. I'm not saying that's a hollow crank pin, because the depth of it is only about that much. So I'm not saying that's a hollow crank pin, but the gap I see around there, it almost looks like that connecting rod was put on the wrong way. I'm going to put my magnifier on here real quick. I don't know, maybe it's an optical illusion. I'm not sure. Just kind of, to me, it looked like there's a little bit of a gap between the crank pin and there, almost like the chamfered section of the rod was facing outward instead of inward. So maybe that's just an optical illusion. But anyway, so here's the inside of this Surpass engine. Let me pull this rocker cover off here, and I'm gonna say that you're gonna see a completely dry rocker arm area here because OS typically did not lubricate these things from the factory, and only the most I don't know the word I'm looking for, only the most seasoned or experienced people would actually open this up and lube it for the first time also. So here you go. Looks pretty dry to me. Incredibly dry. So If this engine's got a run on it, I'm saying it's got one run. Yeah. Well, I can see evidence right here. If you look in the crevice there, you can see that there's some fuel, residual fuel. This engine was run one time. I'm going to say this engine was run one time for a very short amount of time. Probably just a fire up, and that was it. Maybe. I don't know. This one's kind of tough, and maybe I'm just kind of losing my touch here. But because of the way this looks in here, sometimes some of this tells me that it's never been run, but yet then I see this little caramel sheen down here, and I can actually move that. I got a fresh Q-tip here. Fresh Q-tip. There's that little caramel sheen. I don't know, maybe this thing hasn't been run. Maybe that's from the factory like that. I don't know. If it's been run, man, it probably goes beyond my 25-year nose sniff test because this engine came out in '88. So I don't know, maybe this engine has never been run. It just, you know, this exhaust, the header here, there's a little bit of carbon dotting that you see here, just really seems indicative of a muffler, a header at least, that's been used at least one time. But man, I don't know. I'm really starting to wonder now. Although, I don't know if you're going to be able to see there. Maybe on the video you'll be able to see. Does it look like there's some blackening of the exhaust valve stem there? If so, then it's been run. That probably would only take one run to do that. But anyway, so here's this has been a quick kind of inside look at the last engine I will ever buy, and probably one that I'll never get rid of, unfortunately, for those of you that might be interested in this. I'll just close by saying I do have plenty of other engines available in various states. Some are still new in box, not many of those. Many have a box, many don't have a box. I've got probably 15 junk, I'll call junk engines. They're not really junk engines, they're just engines that either are missing a prop washer or a nut, or they don't have an exhaust, and I've had to borrow pieces from other engines. So that's what I'm considering a junk engine. They're perfectly fine, they run well if you have, you know, all the other things necessary for them. So those are going to be a little bit harder to sell. I've got some in box still, but anyway, that's kind of the status of things right now. I hope you enjoyed kind of a trip down memory lane on this OSFS 91 Surpass engine, because I've learned a little bit more about the engine itself too. So anyway, thank you all for watching.